to give you a brief explanation of what we're doing with the project in the Stevens Point area. We're going to skip some of these slides, but I'll just give you some direction here. So go ahead, Scott. Okay. We have a project that we are currently working on that covers basically from the 54 interchange all the way up to US Highway 10 to the west. And it encompasses a number of things, including the 54 interchange, the B interchange, 66 Stanley Street, the US 10 East, 66 West interchange, and as I mentioned, the Stanley Street interchange. Continue. The intent of this whole project, all of the projects are we're assessing safety, operations, pavement, bike and pedestrian needs in order to meet existing and future transportation needs within the corridor. Our intent also is to preserve the corridor, limited impacts on adjacent properties, and and also make it work for the traveling public. Continue. Next slide, please. And so keep going here, and I'll continue on here. The intent of our presentation here to the Board of Public Works tonight is primarily for the 10 East, 66 West interchange area. That's what we're intending to focus on. I have a couple representatives here, Matt Messina and Todd Pulla from SRF, and I'm going to let Matt take ahead with this to give a little bit more information on it. SRF is working on an environmental document for us. This particular project that we're going to be specifically focusing on is some work within the 10 East interchange area, as well as a pedestrian crossing, a bike pedestrian crossing, and also auxiliary lanes between the 10 East interchange and the 66 Stanley Street interchange. We've provided some information for the Board of Public Works that is specific to the 10 East interchange, some concepts that we are working on. We're working on an environmental document, and that's where SRF comes in. I do have some of these maps available for the rest of the Common Council, so I'll let Matt go ahead.
Thanks, Jeff. My name is Matt Messina with SRF Consulting. My associate Todd Pullum here as well. You might recognize our last names or might know some of us. Both Todd and I actually grew up in Stevens Point. Unfortunately, we both don't still live here. But we were lucky enough to be able to come back home and work with the DOT on this project and really start to dig into what are the main issues with the 10 interchange and kind of going forward from there, and then really start to develop some concepts to address those issues. So what I'll do today is we'll just go through a kind of real high level what the key issues are, what we're seeing, and I'll go into a brief explanation of some of the concepts, what we heard from the public information meeting that we had about 3 weeks ago. We'll kind of highlight some of the key comments that we've received so far. We're still inquiring and getting more input, so there's still a lot of information, and these concepts are still subject to change and really turn into more of a concrete alternative. But as we go forward, I'll kind of get into the presentation here a little bit. Why don't you just hop forward to the key issues. There's a summary kind of in the. So a lot of this information is just kind of back pocket information, kind of just explains the corridor. I won't really get into that too much. I think we're all pretty familiar with where signals are and different things of that nature. But from a key issue, so what are the key issues out there today? From an intersection operations perspective, when you compare that to how other intersections are operating throughout the state, we expect those to reach the traffic volumes are going to reach the levels where when you start to compare it to other intersections, by approximately 2020, you're really going to start to need improvements at the interchange itself. We understand that there are queues during peak holiday periods, recreational periods that do impact I-39 today, and that is of concern as well. And we'll see if this works. So there's a capacity issue that's on the horizon. There's also an intersection spacing issue. So right now, current guidelines really call for, you've got your interchange and then you want to have your next adjacent local intersection typically at least a quarter mile away from that interchange. And right now, both Country Club Drive and Maple Bluff don't meet those guidelines. So Maple Bluff in particular is only about 400 feet away from the interchange, and that does create one of the biggest issues that are out there and with the interchange today. That proximity also creates a lot of driver confusion. There's a lot of westbound motorists that will actually turn onto Maple Bluff thinking they're turning onto the freeway. And so that's one of those things that we're going to try to address as part of each of these concepts. Finally, the ramp geometry is also, was designed many years ago, and so standards have changed. So that geometry actually is considered substandard by today's design standards. And so each of these interchange concepts would actually look at addressing those ramp issues and make it more of a standard type of ramp design. So that's kind of the quick summary of the issues that are out there. Now you'll notice I didn't really talk much about 10 East, further east of Maple Bluff. You know, that's kind of a separate issue. I mean, we're talking about the interchange it has its own problems, and 10 East of Maple Bluff kind of has its own issues. It starts to gray the line a little bit as you started to get into some of these concepts, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about just high-level strategies to address issues in the area, whether it's interchange or kind of 10 East. And then when we get into the concepts, we'll get a little bit into about how they kind of mesh with some of them. Some of the things we're going to be looking at, as I mentioned, geometric changes. So interchange configurations. We'll look at intersection modifications, different turn lanes, different things of that nature. We'll look at the intersection spacing and have it fall in line with the guidelines. Also, potentially traffic control changes. Going along with those, there's different signings, pavement markings, a lot of things that can be done to help address issues in this area. One of the key components kind of down the 10 East side, so east of Maple Bluff, is really, as everyone knows, there's just a ton of access over there. Almost every business has an access, some have multiple, and having all that access creates a safety issue, and it makes Highway 10 operate less efficient than what it otherwise could. So we're looking at opportunities of, can you combine driveways? Can you relocate driveways? Can some be removed? All aimed at reducing the potential conflicts and making it a safer corridor. There's the potential, we have some options tonight that we'll show you as far as frontage and backage road systems and what those could look like. There might be the possibility of relocating some of the intersections, as well as doing something a little bit different with the cross section on Highway 10, whether now it becomes a full raised median with no cross access. So there's different things there that can be done as well. I'm just going to throw a couple just broad examples of some mitigation that could be done. So looking at a shared or cross access. So you've got two businesses. They probably, right now they may have their separate drivers or two driveways, and now they might have one that is combined between the two. It's kind of hard to see in this area a little bit, but essentially this is kind of just a couple examples of a frontage and backage road system. And you'll see it's a 4-lane corridor. It's got a grass median in there. On the bottom is actually a backage road system, so all the businesses there they don't have any access onto the main roadway there. All their access comes off of the backage road. On the north side is actually a frontage road, so all the businesses, they feed off the frontage road. Another frontage road example, this is actually over in Appleton on College Drive, just east of 41, just kind of not too far from the mall area. And this is kind of an example of a frontage road gone bad, per se. It's not that it doesn't serve the function of providing the access, but as you can see at some of these adjacent intersections, that little white line that's at those intersections is actually a raised median. So sometimes those frontage roads if they're not designed properly, there might be other mitigation that needs to happen. So, but if you look on the far left, the northwest corner, you see a frontage road that kind of wraps around, and my pointer's right in here. My battery's doesn't have too much left in this thing. But that's a better example of a frontage road and how it ties in. It gets that spacing from the intersection further to the north there. Another backage road example. This is just down the road, not too far on 10, over towards the old cops and the other businesses that are out there. Here's a backage road system. It works much better out here, and this is the type of improvement that we'd be looking for further west down this same corridor. There is also an adjacent overpass example that we'll get into, and what that does is it actually helps. So the main interchange is in the kind of bottom left of this, and then to the north there's actually an adjacent overpass, and what that does is that kind of helps get some of those local traffic trips that are just trying to get from point A to point B but have to travel through the interchange. What this adjacent overpass does is it lets them avoid the congested interchange and lets them get to their point A to B a little bit faster. So that's also an option that could be considered as well. As we get into the various concepts, I'm going to start with the interchanges, and I'm going to kind of go somewhat briefly over some of these. And I will point out that these are concepts at this point, and we've heard a lot of feedback on different things. So, but we wanted to get these out there and get them in front of people to get their responses. And so this first concept 2, is a partial cloverleaf. Essentially, it's the same configuration that's there today. Now, there would be some capacity improvements that would go along with that, but to get some of that, to address some of those geometric design standard issues with how the ramps and the speeds of those ramps, what that does is that northeast loop actually gets pushed out a little bit further to the east. And so what that does, and then in addition to the close intersection spacing with Maple Bluff, we would recommend that Maple Bluff would get cul-de-saced off there, and if that were to happen, there would clearly need to be another outlet for the neighborhood and the residents in the area. And so that's where we show a line along the Sandy Lane alignment on the east side there. On the west side, we actually show Country Club Drive being realigned to the west of kind of the hilltop area. Now, this is strictly just looking at the access spacing guidelines. So this gets you into that quarter-mile spacing. And so this gives you that frame of reference of how far, quarter mile, this would provide ideal operations. And so that's kind of this concept. Concept 4 is a partial cloverleaf, and it's a partial cloverleaf A. And essentially what this does is it takes the existing interchange configuration and it flips the loops, and it adds in some additional ramps. So the interesting thing here is that, so right now you've essentially have 4 intersections from Country Club Drive over to Maple Bluff, including the 2 ramp terminal intersections. This would in turn actually turn that down into 2 intersections. So you'd have the western ramp intersection would actually be at the Country Club Drive location as it is today. The east ramp terminal intersection would actually be at the Maple Bluff Road intersection, or Old Highway 18, where that ties in. So, but what that would do is it would cut off that Old Highway 18. So once again, we want to have to look at something to kind of tie back and get that access for that neighborhood to the southeast back to Highway 10. And then that also gets that quarter-mile spacing in there as well. So concept 5 is a kind of a standard diamond with roundabouts, and from the public information meeting, one of the biggest things we heard was no roundabouts. And so, roundabouts are a great tool, when they're put in the right spot. From our perspective, this may not be the ideal location for roundabouts. It does provide, what roundabouts do provide here is it kind of negates that access spacing, because you actually prefer to have roundabouts a little bit closer together, so the speed differential as you're traveling between those stays more uniform. So you're not going 20 miles an hour through the roundabout, then going up to 40, and then back down to 20, 40, 20. It kind of helps keep you more of a uniform 20, 25, 30 mile an hour speed limit between the roundabouts. But basically, the long and story short of it is that there wasn't a lot of support for this from the first public information meeting that we had. This draft concept 3 is a single point concept. Some of you may be familiar with these. There aren't too many of them in the state, but they are a fairly popular interchange design. What this does is it takes the 2 ramp terminal intersections and combines them into one intersection in the middle. And so essentially that would leave the possibility that Country Club Drive and Maple Bluff would be able to remain in their current locations. Now, the access spacing doesn't necessarily meet the design standards, doesn't necessarily meet the quarter-mile criteria in this instance, but it could function. You might need to have a little extra capacity, extra lanes in that common section there from that perspective. What this concept does do is it kind of separates the 10 interchange, and then the issues on 10 east of Maple Bluff are really kind of separate issues under this concept. So this concept could be implemented without doing anything really east of Maple Bluff as part of the interchange project. A couple other key notes on the single point is single points are typically the most expensive design, and that's partially because the bridge structure is such a large structure to build. And so that's where a lot of the cost comes in. Also, maintenance of traffic is challenging. So this, if a single point design were to be constructed, there's a possibility that this section of roadway would have to be shut down for, a year to construct the bridge. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind as we're going through these concepts. Now, I'm not going to go into these frontage road, backage road ones for the single point. We can come back to them if we want. We also have these frontage backage road concepts in a little bit, but I want to focus on just the interchanges for now. So this last concept, concept 6, is what we call a folded design. Essentially, it's similar to a standard diamond, but then you just fold it in half. So the two legs on the south actually get turned into loops. Now, we did actually add a separate southbound on-ramp into this one. But essentially what this concept would do is, on the west side, you'd have Country Club Drive in relatively the same location as it is today. There would be a new southbound off-ramp that would tie in opposite of Country Club Drive. On the east side, what would happen is Maple Bluff would be closed, and on the south side, Old Highway 18 would be realigned from its current location, and it would actually go to the west of the Quick Trip today and tie in opposite of the ramp. And so there are some benefits to this concept 6. As far as kind of maintaining 2 points of access and connectivity. Now, it would require some access management, different things to the east. And I'll get into some of those concepts here in a little bit. There's also the flexibility that this option could be constructed half at a time. As I noted, the proximity of Maple Bluff to the interchange is kind of the critical. It's that kind of that tipping point. That 400 feet is really tight. On the west side, Country Club Drive, is closer to 600-700 feet. That gives you a little bit more breathing room. It's still not ideal, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So this interchange could get constructed half at a time, which does give it a little bit more of that flexibility. It is also one of the more moderately priced interchange concepts as well, especially when you compare it to the single point option. And I will point out kind of based on the public information meeting, the two concepts that we've got the most feedback and most positive feedback, I guess, it was the single point, and then this concept 6 were the two that were kind of coming forward as the most favorable from what we've received so far. So you might be asking, well, what happens, if you have to close Maple Bluff as part of, and Old Highway 18 as part of this concept, well, how do you still get access to all these businesses and kind of address a lot of those issues that are there today? I mean, everyone knows it's difficult to get in and out. I know a lot of people avoid the corridor when it's busy as well. So an option or a concept that we just highlighted here is a frontage road concept and how that could tie in. And so on the bottom left, you'll see Old Highway 18 is realigned opposite the ramp, and then you can see some essentially it's a frontage road that kind of loops around goes in front of Grazzi's and Wendy's and kind of cuts back behind Goodwill and then ties back into a Sandy Lane alignment. Another thing that we've kind of heard loud and clear is that you can see the dashed line south of Sandy Lane going down to Old Highway 18. There's been a lot of feedback that that's just not a good option. And so I think from our perspective, I think that's one thing that we're going to try to, try to avoid, moving forward as we turn these concepts into alternatives. On the north side, essentially with Maple Bluff closed, once again, it would be another frontage road type system. Yeah, so go cut in front of Target, kind of loop around, and the exact location of that frontage road, is still a little subject to change. Needs to get a little further vetted when you start to look at more impacts, but essentially that gives you the feel for where all these businesses would get their access points. All their access would come off the frontage road. The Sandy Lane intersection would likely be a signal, and so forth. So that's the frontage road kind of concept. The backage road concept that we kind of looked at a little bit earlier, very similar in nature. Instead of it being the primary access to serve the businesses being on the front of the buildings, now there's an access on the back side, so it gives them that alternative route. This is something where it may be a combination of maybe they have some accesses on Highway 10. Maybe we go to that shared access, cross-access type of agreements, as well as providing the backage road. That there's options to that. And that's kind of some of the tick marks that we have shown in there, just to kind of show what the yellow X's maybe close some accesses, center an access, and provide some cross-access in there. So, excuse me. There's some benefits to that. There is a north-south. We dashed a north-south roadway in there that's just east of Target. That could be a partial access intersection. What I call it is like a 3/4 access, and so you'd be able to turn left from Highway 10 onto that roadway, but you wouldn't be able to, if you were coming from Target, you wouldn't be able to turn left or cross onto Highway 10. Okay. Excuse me, my voice is failing me a little bit, but concept 6 here is really that adjacent overpass. And so what this is here is just showing an option of if you were to tie Old Highway 18 in, as we talked about, there would be constructing a new bridge south of the interchange that would provide access from Old Highway 18 over to Country Club Drive. So that would give some of those local trips that want to head into town from the neighborhood that they could avoid the 10 interchange itself. Nah, it's fine. And so that would give that a little bit of extra relief to the interchange there. There would have to be some access modifications likely on the corridor. I didn't show necessarily, or we didn't show any, the shared access or different things like that, but those are all things that could be incorporated to any of these. So that's a kind of a high-level review of, the frontage, backage road, adjacent options. So I'd be looking for your feedback as far as, what you like, what you don't like, what you think is feasible or prefer. Each of these are options that kind of go with all the interchange alternatives that are concepts that are out there. As far as other projects in the area, there are auxiliary lanes that are planned on I-39 that essentially run from an auxiliary lane is essentially an extra lane from the 10 interchange up to the 66 East interchange. One lane in both the northbound and southbound direction would be added in. That's a improvement, a capacity improvement that's been identified. I don't think anybody would deny that that's the busiest section of I-39 in the area. So that's on the books. We also want to be mindful as we go through this about ped bike accommodations. I think maintaining that throughout the project is a key component, and so we're thinking about that too as we go through this. And what we propose is 3 different options at this point. We've been working with Portage County and coordinating, and with the how it gels with the bike master plan. There's really 3 options. So you could build a separate pedestrian bridge on the north side of Highway 10. And if you kind of look at just logical termini at this point, Maple Bluff on the east side over to Country Club Drive, get them to the signals where they'd be able to cross back to other facilities that are currently there. Option B would be building a separate pedestrian bridge where on the south side of I-39. And part of the reason why a separate bridge is desired is that when maintenance of the current 10 bridge needs to occur, right now they need that extra width to be able to, of where the current sidewalk is, they need that bridge width to be able to kind of stage traffic and really be able to do any maintenance on the bridge. And so having that PED bridge separated provides that benefit of being able to keep that PED facility open throughout any type of maintenance on the bridge that would occur. Option C is that adjacent overpass. So we've heard some comments if you're going to build a bridge there, why not have a bridge there for traffic as well, and combine the 2? So that's one thing, and it would definitely, option C is a more circuitous route for pedestrians to get across, but it's definitely an option that's on the table. So more or less, Jeff, that's the summary of the concepts and the options that are kind of out there. We're soliciting your feedback at this point, and I don't know if you want to talk about next steps.
Certainly would. Just one thing in addition, right now, as far as bikes and pedestrians, there currently is a safety problem at where pedestrians and bikes try to cross the ramp terminals, and it has been identified as a hazardous location. So getting bikes and pedestrians away from the ramp terminals would also provide some safety benefits. The intent of what we're working on presenting here to the Board of Public Works, and we also will be meeting with the town of Hull next week. At this point in time, we are trying to develop the concepts and try to coming to some understandings of what the correct alternatives that we should be considering. So our intent right now is to both engage the public as well as the City of Stevens Point, Town of Hull, to educate them in terms of what some of the concepts that we are looking at, and ultimately what we want to get is feedback, and we're certainly open to questions, not necessarily only tonight, but there is in the packets that we provided, there is an email address as well as phone numbers if there is an interest to get in touch with us in respect to the project that we're working on. So if there's any questions that you have from the Board of Public Works, we are, from a scheduling standpoint, working, you back up here, it's going to take probably about a year yet to complete this environmental document. We're looking at having another public information meeting probably next March, although that date is yet to be determined. And in the meantime, we are, like I say, looking to both educate and to engage both communities, as well as to get comments back to give us some direction and help you understand what will work or not.